and upholding the rule of law. The government of Ghana is confident and optimistic about the positive results in its investment drive through the GIPC. Ghana has 8 million hectares of arable land, well irrigated by a wide network of water bodies, making it a region ready for large-scale mechanized agriculture. The government and major policy planners recognize that expanding the agro-industrial base is the best path to develop. Ghana has put in place the right legal and regulatory framework to increase foreign direct investment. The Industrial Zones Program allows manufacturers and agro-processors to take advantage of favorable tax and duty incentives to produce for exports from Ghana into the EU and US markets. A rich cultural history and wonderful natural beauty makes Ghana a great tourist destination. The Year of Return Tourism and Marketing campaign in 2019 positioned Ghana as a key travel and investment destination for African Americans and people of the global diaspora. The year recorded significant increases in the number
Yes, I'm ready. Good afternoon. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, okay. My president, you can go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, welcome everyone once again to the third session for today of our first hybrid aquaculture conference. And I'm so honored to be moderating on this third session, on this third day. I will be talking about aquaculture governance in West Africa, principles, challenges, and the way forward. And we have two speakers on this particular session. We have Dr. Oladipo Opadoku, who will be presenting with a focus on environmental protection in the aquaculture space. And also Mr. Emmanuel Menyoli, who will be presenting with focus on aquaculture governance. Okay, before I introduce my speaker, let me just take their introduction and their profile. Dr. Opadoku is an aquaculture specialist. He graduated from the University of Ibadan. He has a BSc in zoology, MSc in fisheries management, and his doctorate in aquaculture and fisheries ecology. And presently, he works with the Lagos State Agricultural Development Authority as the head of fisheries subcomponent. And from his profile, I could say he's been a consultant in 10 different projects, from the consultant to agro-processing productivity enhancement and livelihood improvement support projects. That is appeals, which has been done in Lagos State. He was a facilitator at the workshop on flood control using pen culture system. In order not to take so much of our time, I'd like to bring on Dr. Opadoku as he takes us on environmental protection. But quickly before he comes, I would quickly say, what do we really understand by environmental protection? And it's said to be a practice of protecting the natural environment by individuals, organizations, and governments. So it's there to tell us that it's not just one person's purview to be the one to protect our environment, but it's everyone's part. Everybody needs to play a part for us to be able to achieve that as an individual, as an organization, and the government at large. And it's an objective to conserve natural resources and existing natural environment welfare possible, to repair damage and reverse trends. And I know in the aquaculture space, there's a lot of damages that has gone on. So I welcome Dr. Opadoku as you share your screen and share your presentation. You have the mic, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so I'll be presenting on environmental protection in aquaculture. Maybe the headquarters there can help me to share the screen straight. We know that environmental protection is the practice of protecting the natural environment by individuals, organizations, and governments. That means that it is not the issue of government duty alone, but it is the duty of everyone, especially this period. I'll be talking much more to our farmers and our organizations. Then the second presenter will probably talk more to our government. The objectives of environmental protection in aquaculture is to conserve natural resources and the existing natural environment. We would like to achieve a sustainable management of waters of the state by protecting and enhancing water quality management while allowing economic and social development. That means that when I'm trying to protect the environment, it must still allow economic use of such environment, especially our water as it relates to aquaculture, as well as the social development. We'll also be looking at a case that you want to repair the damage that is done already. Some damages have been done already, even to our ecosystem, as well as probably reverse negative trends in these current practices. What are the main reasons for environmental degradation? The first one is population growth. We are having a population boom nowadays in the whole world. And with that, we have increased demand for proteinous food, and also the technology advancement, though is doing a lot of good, but we have the side effects also, which is also affecting our environment. Every human being has a right to a sustainable and healthy environment. There is a need to protect ecological system in a way to favor human health. The fact that I am practicing my own aquaculture does not mean I should infringe on other people's human rights. We must find a way that while we are practicing our own aquaculture, at the same time, we are not affecting the environment negatively. However, there is often a disagreement on the extent of environmental impact of human activity. So protection measures are occasionally debated. What are the major pollutants that we have in aquaculture? The first one is the therapeutic compounds, that is the antibiotics, the growth promoters. Nowadays, those in archery sector, they seem to be more guilty in the use of antibiotics now. A lot of them just pumping drugs here and there. Why they say in a bid to either protect an infection or to treat a particular disease. Now, these antibiotics will eventually find their way into the general ecosystem. Likewise, we have a lot of farmers now, they don't even bother to identify what is particularly wrong with their farms. Immediately they notice any symptoms like this, they just bombard their fish with antibiotics. All these eventually find their way into larger bodies of water, and it affects the system because there is no way, even the fish that you are selling out to people that you have already so much bombarded with different antibiotics, it has often led to drug resistance in several people. But because if you consume a particular drug often, when such a drug is prescribed to you later, it might not actually work, and the doctor may not quickly identify where the problem is. We also have another pollutant in aquaculture. That's the fish fecal material, the metabolic waste. Another one is fertilizers, especially those of us that are practicing earthen pond culture. You know, when you fertilize your water, yes, it is good, but still it's a source of pollutants at the end of the day. The sediments, the unconsumed feed, all the nitrogenous waste, they also serve as kind of pollutants eventually. Then there is no way that there will not be one or two dead fish. Such dead fish is also cause they cause a kind of pollution in the environment. The nutrients, I would like to speak a little bit on this. Several farmers, in a bid to achieve quick results, they give to their fish feed that are probably, let me use the word, too rich, so to say, so that the nitrogenous waste, eventually, you have a lot of nitrogenous waste. You can't imagine somebody that is raising tilapia and you are giving such a tilapia feed that is about 45% crude protein. That is a lot of waste because tilapia will not need such a thing. People that are raising catfish, maybe Clarias, Garapinos, trying to give feed that is as high as 50-55% to the fish when it is not in the fry stage. That is a lot of waste. So it causes pollution in the environment eventually. What are the negative environmental impacts that aquaculture actually causes? The first one is that there is a need for a lot of white fish to feed farmed fish. In fish feed industry, you actually need fish meal. And this is mainly obtained from the white fish. Indirectly, we are depleting the natural resources. There is also a kind of nutrient buildup. Then we form breeding grounds for diseases. I've mentioned the contribution of antibiotics. There's energy usage in feed production, and there is deforestation, especially when you are trying to acquire land for our earthen pond construction. A lot of trees are destroyed, so we destroy our forest. And when you keep on destroying this forest, it's eventually going to have a problem on the environment at the end of the day. Of course, there's this pollution of drinking water. I'm sure that some of us, especially people that are practicing concrete pond, collapsible tank, movable tanks, by the time you are releasing your water to the environment, some of this water eventually find their way into some people's well or borehole, and it definitely pollutes such drinking water. We've seen cases in which we construct a borehole and the pH was okay initially, borehole or well, maybe around 7, and before you know it, it's just dropped down to probably around 4. In most occasions, this is caused by the underground flow movement of water, and you can always trace most of these things to the way some of our farmers pollute their own water. What are we supposed to do? How do we manage our waste so that it doesn't cause problems to the environment? There are different ways, but I will take them in order of importance. The first thing is to avoid waste production, if possible, as much as possible. But in the case that you cannot avoid that, you need to minimize waste production. For example, identify and maintain optimal nutrient requirements for your farmed fish species. I think our research institute will come in this. We need to let our farmers know as researchers that this is what you need. This is the optimal requirement for your fish to perform. So by the time we let them know, then they'll probably stick to this instead of wasting feed, wasting nutrients, and wasting their resources. Then waste management also strategies. We also need to learn how we can reuse water. We need to learn how we can recycle water. We need to learn how to recover part of the waste water for reuse. We need to treat wastewater to produce potentially degrading impacts and dispose waste in an environmentally sound manner. As a pity, I can't see them sharing my screen, but I add some pictures there. But how do we eventually prevent environmental harm? The first thing that I would like to emphasize is advocacy campaign on the importance of environmental protection. Our government has a lot to do in this. Our organizations, the various fishery societies has a lot to do in this one. We need to advocate, we need to campaign on the importance of environmental protection. Let our farmers know that what they are releasing to the environment will eventually bounce back, even on them too. And then we need to use an ecosystem approach in planning and decision making. It has to be a collaborative approach. It's not a matter of just one person. All the stakeholders have to come together to exchange information, and it might even lead to some kind of conflict resolution strategies. You can imagine a case that a farmer just released water to the environment, causing pollution. Probably there is no proper drainage in its environment. definitely people around, it's going to cause a kind of conflict. And unless a solution is found to this, probably by digging a deep well, a kind of socket where it can release its water, or to treat the water before it's ever released to the environment. When there is a big discussion, there will be a kind of ecosystem approach to plan and to decide the best way to prevent environmental harm. We also need to avoid discharge of waste that can lead to loss of native aquatic vegetation or organism. We must avoid discharge of waste that can lead to increase in algal bloom, non-native species of aquatic animals. Stop introducing species that are not native to a particular water environment. We need to check that one. There was a case I didn't want to mention the country, where it was discovered that water that was being used, to prevent, in order to get a kind of all-mate tilapia, as it is when it finds its way to the larger body of water, later they discovered that majority of the fish there have just been indirectly turned to male instead of female. So such a thing is destroying the ecosystem. We need to avoid discharge of waste that is offensive to human, to livestock, or even native animals. When we do that, we'll be able to protect our environment, and then together with a kind of collaborative approach, both from the government, from all the stakeholders, the farmers, and even everybody concerned, even the feed producer, we'll be able to achieve a kind of serene environment where not only the farmers, but even everybody will be able to benefit. So that while we are trying to improve our own aquaculture practices, while we are trying to increase our own profits, will not be causing adverse environmental effects. So let me just hold on this. Then during our question and answer, I think I'll be able to explain more. Thank you, my moderator, and all the audience.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for that wonderful presentation. I'd like to encourage our audience to please send in their questions in the chat box, your questions, so that they can be answered by the presenters. Quickly, Doctor, I have a question or two for you. I said, I'd like to know, is there a way that the recognized antibiotics, metallic waste, and the likes of it that you mentioned, is there any law or a way in place already of how it could be controlled by the farmers? Or are there anything like a penalty to farmers that do these things to pollute our environment? Is there anything in place like that at the moment?
As at the moment,
how do you think that can be put? Okay.
Yeah, as at the moment, in some countries, actually, there are laws in place to guide against this. Okay. But the problem is enforcement. And it's not been easy to get enough personnel to even detect when this wastewater are going to the environment. You can imagine a farmer that is operating in far remote village, and there is nobody to just know when he or she is discharging his water, the kind of practices that he has undergone, even while sending his water to the larger body of water. So when such pollution comes in, you can not easily trace from where it has come. So that has made it a little bit difficult for the government to control and prevent this kind of pollutants in our environment. But definitely there are some laws in place already. Enforcement is the main thing. But I think what we can do,
Go on, sir.
I said I think what we can do is, by the time we do a kind of advocacy that farmers know the danger that lies in what they are doing, the practices will be the practices of these things. Let me give you an example. The price of this will be reduced. For example, now it is a known fact that if you lay your fish with antibiotics and you eventually decide to smoke and send to some European country, such fish will be rejected. So with that, some farmers have started reducing the use of antibiotics on their fish, especially when they know that the person that will come to buy intends to probably smoke and send to some of these European countries. But that's not enough. Although that is a kind of way to control this. Farmers need to know the negative effects of this, and it is going to be done not just by the government, but by various organizations that these farmers belong to, even including their cooperative societies.
Okay, now that takes me to my second question, which was what I wanted to ask you when you talked about advocacy. Do you think, because reaching out to these people really, yes, it might not be from the government, from the association and all, but are those associations really informed about this toxic waste that's been coming out from the farmers and all of that? And how do you think, in a very simple way, how do you think we can cascade it even to the least farmer, for him to be able to understand how this affects it and the ripple effect of this waste pollution, how it affects every single one of us, not just in our health, but in other ways? How do you think that can be achieved? Yes, in a very simple way. In 1 minute.
Okay, yeah, quickly. What's the way we have been trying to combat it from our own end here? For example, in Lagos State, Nigeria, what we have been trying to do is to invite those people that we regard as contact farmers. These are the leaders of farmers, the leaders of different farmers group. So I work with Lagos State Agricultural Development Authority. So what we do is that we invite some of these farmers to meetings and we try to educate them. So, but that's so that if the lead farmers are well informed, we encourage them to go back and teach in their various cooperative groups. The same thing can be done by different organizations in different conferences that we attend. I think we need to increase more in our advocacy against environmental degradation so that we can actually protect our environment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. I think before the end of the session, we'll get some more questions from our viewers and our participants, and then we can ask you this question there. Without taking so much of our time, let me call on the next speaker, Mr. Emmanuel Mayoli Molua. He's a senior biodiversity consultant at the Norwegian Council for Africa, and he is a member of Norwegian Council for Africa, Department of Climate Change and the Environment. He's a former senior consultant to the regional delegation of Fisheries Southwest region, that is Cameroon. He's a consultant at Omni Frontiers International. He's the Secretary General of the West African region of the World Aquaculture Society, and so much more other associations and organizations that he belongs to. He's been involved in several biodiversity projects in the African continent and beyond, which cuts across marine littering, IUU fishing, aquaculture development, and others. His specialization is in policy development, and he's devoted to protecting the rights of indigenous people in their natural resources. He's a strong advocate for inclusive governance in natural resource management. He has a background in international fisheries management, laws of the seas, communication, and business administration. With no doubt, I know he's in the right place to deliver on this topic of aquaculture governance. And quickly, before I ask Mr. Emmanuel to start speaking, governance to me is referred to as a structure and process that are designed to ensure accountability, transparency, explosiveness, rule of law, stability, equity, and inclusiveness of empowerment on a broad-based participation. That is, governance is not just about one person, it's not about the government, but it also has the individual, and everyone altogether is involved in this. So I make welcome Mr. Emmanuel Mayoli. You have the floor now.
Thank you so much, my able moderator. I'm trying to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So for the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'm just going to put a roof upon what my co-speaker has spoken about environmental protection. The objective of my lecture today is to talk about the real meaning of what governance is. You know, the problems we have in aquaculture management is not the lack of feed, it's not the lack of finance, it is bad governance. So I will discuss. I'll discuss the real meaning of what governance is, and the hope is that this lecture and everything we've done today would assist policymakers to establish what is now referred to as good governance in aquaculture management. So I would look at the principles which underline governance in aquaculture. I will look at how these principles can be implemented in practice, and then I'll look at possible challenges, because to have good governance is challenging. And then I'll probably give some advice as the way forward, what we need to do as governments, as an institution, to try to get what we refer to as good governance. So governance, like you said, Madam the Moderator, is not a person. It is not the Ministry of Fisheries. It is not the Director of Aquaculture. It is a process. And this process has to do with the level of interactions between the government on the one hand and the private actors on the other hand. So aquaculture governance means three things. The first is the stakeholder involvement. Stakeholders must be involved in aquaculture management, and also there must be accountability at the part of the government and also at the part of the private sector. In fact, anybody who has power to make decisions must be accountable. And then the last part of what actually governance actually means is the presence of effective application and implementation of the law. So this issue of governance is very broad. I'm not going to be able to talk about everything. You know, governance occurs in several levels. It occurs at the micro levels, where which is basically the decision on who is supposed to be Minister of Fisheries, Minister of Aquaculture. That's at the micro level. But I will focus more on the micro level, where I will look at an authority in the one hand and the people, how the authority interacts with the people through participative governance to solve problems in aquaculture management. So why is governance important? Governance is important for several reasons. Because one, it is to regulate all aspects of aquaculture management. We all know that aquaculture development is very critical. One speaker told us today that one little error made in aquaculture management can cause the aquaculture practitioner to lose money and a lot more. Somebody can consume bad quality fish and dies. You know, so there has to be thorough regulations from production right up to production. So aquaculture governance is needed also to control price. And one of the most important things which I think aquaculture governance is important is to manage land. We need land to start an aquaculture project, but land belongs to everyone. The land belongs to the state, you know. So how do we own land? A lot of disputes can occur only based on land. I know a lot of people who've lost their lives just because they are fighting over land. So we need governance now to distribute, to say who has the right to own land and exclude the others from owning this land, such that an aquaculture project can happen successfully. And also, we need power supply. The government has the responsibility to provide us with power supply, even though now this responsibility is shared between the government and the private sector in terms of the use of generators and things like that. And then we need good quality water, which is supposed to be provided by the government. So these are the reasons that we need aquaculture governance. So the objective of aquaculture governance, the reason why we need to have governance, is for three things. The first is to make aquaculture project very profitable to the fish farmers. So if a fish farmer does everything correctly and does not reap profits out of its fisheries, that is a sign of bad governance. The second indicator of what governance should be is that every action taken to carry out an aquaculture project should be environmentally friendly, like my co-speaker said, and also that there is some sort of social equitability where everybody who has anything to do with aquaculture, be it all the stakeholders, the primary and the secondary stakeholders, benefit from aquaculture projects. If they don't benefit, then that is bad governance. So how do we structure this governance? How do we make these things to happen? We need to follow 4 principles, and these principles have to be implemented all, not one. And I'm just going to give you just a theoretical framework. In Africa, we are still talking about the theory, but these principles that I'm going to say here are practiced well in other regions, especially in countries like Norway and Canada, where we are very advanced in fisheries and aquaculture management. The first principle to have good governance in aquaculture is effectiveness and efficiency. Any policy that is developed to solve an aquaculture project must be ready to solve that project. If there is a disease outbreak, for instance, and then a policy is developed and does not solve this project or does not solve this disease, that is bad governance. And how do you do this? There are 3 basic strategies that we need to follow to achieve effectiveness and efficiency in aquaculture management, which the first is integration. We need to interact. The government must interact among themselves. For instance, the Minister of Fisheries can interact with the Minister of Public Health, with the Ministry of Public Health to look for solutions. And then the government, and then the private sector also must interact amongst themselves. So that is what we normally refer to as vertical and horizontal integration. So the private sector interact among themselves and the public sector interact among themselves. And then now the private sector and the public sector both interact amongst each other. That is how we know. And the reason for this is because it is through this interaction that you know, because governments cannot solve all problems. What they do is they prioritize their problems. This one comes first, this one comes second and third, because usually we have limited resources running our governments, right? So when we prioritize these problems, it is the stakeholder that will tell the government that this is what is more important than this. This is where their attention should be. So you get that through integration. And then the second part, which is extremely important, and my speaker also spoke about it, is decentralization. We need to share our responsibilities. The government must share its power with the private sector so that local communities have the right to make and enforce laws. You know, so if there is a problem, you do not need to wait for the Minister of Fisheries to react before this problem is solved. We need decentralization, and then we need inclusion. Women, children, poor, rich, everybody should be involved in this process. This is the only way we can achieve effectiveness and efficiency. Then the second principle is equity. We cannot think only about ourselves. We need to think about different groups. And these groups are what? Us living now and the people living that and our unborn children. Governance should think about unborn children. So if we talk about environmental protection, like my colleague said, what we are actually saying is that we are preserving the environment for our children. Because if our parents do not preserve this environment for us, we would not have been achieving. It could have been very impossible for us to enjoy this beautiful environment that we have now. So governance must think equity, the present generation, the needs of the present generation, and those of the future generation. So therefore, there has to be some level of sustainability. And then the third principle is accountability, the degree to which officials answer to their decisions. And this accountability is not only shared by it's not only supposed to be done by the government. It is supposed to be done by anybody who has power, even in the private sector. The thing is, whatever decision is made by an authority who has power in the private sector, in the public and in the private sector, that person should be able to explain the reasons why he or she makes this decision. So there are 4 strategies that is needed to achieve accountability in aquaculture. The first is that government should not be the only one to make decisions, like we've said. This decision has to be shared by the government and the private sector. And also, there has to be transparency. Transparency in the sense that what decisions must have room for appeal. In Norway and in most other countries that I've visited, there is no decision that you get from the private sector which is not open to appeal. There has to be a procedure. For instance, if you apply for a license, to get a license to start an aquaculture project and they refuse this license, you have the right to appeal so that a different set of eyes look at this decision and then maybe come up with a new decision. And then there has to be awareness raising. We have to raise awareness about what information we have, what key findings we have. The government cannot have information and hide it. They have to share the information through awareness, like my colleague said, through the works of NGOs can help a lot with awareness raising. And then there has to be record keeping, which is the fourth strategy to get accountability. So record keeping is what? We need to know who does what, when, and how, so that we can come back. If there is a problem in the future, we can come back and say, in 2000 and this, you did this. We see in other societies where, for instance, in the issue of crime, where crimes are being prosecuted 30 years after. That is because of record keeping. So there has to be some form of record keeping in Africa for us to ensure that there is accountability. And then the last and very important principle to achieve good governance is predictability of the law. We must know what the laws are. And these laws are supposed to be published in a very clear and easy way for everyone to understand. You do not need to have a master's degree in law to understand what the rules are. Like Madam Ariola said before, these laws can even be translated into traditional languages so that people can understand it immediately. And then the second strategy to get predictability is that decision making must be according to the law. It should not be according to the minister's opinion. It cannot be according to the president's opinion. It has to be according to the law. So that if I want to start an aquaculture project, for instance, I have to look at what the laws are. I read the laws, and if I meet the criteria, I apply. And I have to know that if I meet the criteria, I apply for this, I have to get the decision, which is a yes. So the third part is we have to be able to predict the behavior of people in power. When you are in power, you are a public servant. You are not a movie star. So you are supposed to be there for us. We have to know exactly how you are supposed to behave at any given time. If you know that, okay, they need this amount of money to get a permit, and if I get that amount of money, I go into an office and I don't get that permit, that is bad governance. So we need to be sure about the behavior of people in power. So all of these things I've said, these principles, how do we implement them? How do you know that there is good governance? The first thing for you to know that there is good governance, if there is decentralization. By the time somebody I don't know where the cities are, but somebody in the suburbs in Nigeria has a problem and must travel to Abuja to solve that problem, that is bad governance. And we need decentralization. People in the suburbs, people in the villages must have power to make decisions. And also we need regular interactions. The Minister of Fisheries and all the other agents in the administration must have regular contact with the private sector. And regular, I talk about a month. In Canada, where I did my specialization, you see that you have meetings almost every 2 weeks. The government cannot do anything without consenting with the private sector. So this is just a bottom-up approach in decision-making. And then we need consistent laws. Madam Ariola talked about it. Consistent policy is what? It's a policy which change depending on how the society change. Societies change every day. We did not know about COVID-19 some years ago. So we have COVID-19 now. So our laws must change also. They must be consistent to meet the demands of the present society. So we can change these laws as much as possible. So we need them. I remember one time when I went to Cameroon, I was trying to present my research findings I did in Ghana, in Canada, and I told the director who was then at the time that fisheries management must be ready to work even in wartime situations. He said, no, I should not talk about that because Cameroon is a very peaceful country. And in a few months after, there was war. And that war still exists up to now. So management must be adaptive to meet the demands of present time. And then also there has to be good administrative setup where you don't need to waste a lot of time. people's livelihood depend on aquaculture. So by the time you enter into an office, you need to be served immediately. And then we need research, adequate research. We need this research to be funded. Yeah?
Oh, yeah? Go ahead. We lost you a bit. We lost you for a second. Continue.
Okay. Yeah. So how do you know that there is good governance? Is when the government is able to sponsor research. The government or the private sectors, those who have money, the billionaires, sponsor research in aquaculture. And then this research is the results of this research is published and implemented, because decision making has to be based on two things. Has to be based first on science, and then the second part is based on local ecological knowledge, which is just simply observation of people who've lived in a society for a very long time. So those two scenarios are important in making decisions. So all of this is not easy. I'm not saying that all states in Africa, in West Africa, must have good governance. It's not easy, but it is possible. Why? Because there are challenges to achieve good governance. The first challenge is political will. The people in power must be ready to share their power with the private sector. So the private sector, in some extent, must be able to also provide licenses for aquaculture and make laws and enforce them. So, and then also the second challenge is funding. If you want to have good governance, you need money to build institutions. You need money to build the court system. You need money to build a research infrastructure. You need money to do a lot of things. So you need money to build structures that will support good governance. It is not easy. And then the last part is you need skilled professionals. Madame Ariola spoke about it as well. We need people who are particularly skilled at or trained in all aspects of aquaculture management, including communication, including law enforcement. Because if you go to court today and you carry a case, the judge does not, if the judge is not interested in aquaculture, he will not know because he didn't learn it. When I was in law school, we did not learn about fisheries laws. You understand? And when I was in fisheries management school as well, we did not learn about fisheries laws. So we need people who are trained in all aspects in the entire value chain of aquaculture management. So those are some of the challenges.
Sorry, Mr. Emmanuel, I need you to round up quickly.
Yeah, so the conclusion is that good governance is the biggest problem that we have in aquaculture development in West Africa. It is not fish. It is not funding or fish feed. The second part is that all four principles of good governance must be implemented. And then what is the way forward? Good governance must be a priority. We must keep talking about it, both in the public sector and in the private sector. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Emmanuel. Thank you so much for that robust presentation. And thank you for giving us more understanding into what this is all about. Quickly, I have two questions for you, but I need you to take them in 1 minute because I need to introduce a speaker before we go off onto the live session for the closing ceremony. I want to say, what is the role of the private sector in governance? I've heard you asking that they can contribute into research and the likes of them. So I just need to answer that in 30 seconds. What is the role of private sector in governance?
That's a very important role. That's a very important question. Just in 30 seconds. First, they have several roles to play, but if we could just summarize it to two roles, they have first to assist the government. The government cannot do it alone. Assist the government in the sense that you are more responsible with the actions you take. If you understand or if you feel that your actions will have an impact in the environment or in the resources, you just stop. So they have a role to play in terms of assisting the government, and the second role is to take due diligence. Just be careful with the actions you take. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And also, what's the real meaning of the precautionary approach in governance? What's the real meaning?
That is a very important. Yeah, that's also a very important question. The precautionary approach, we did not have a lot of time to talk about it. It's just the government sharing its responsibility with the private sector. The government says that, okay, I cannot control whatever you are doing all the time. So you have to share this burden of proof with me. Just make sure that what you are doing, like we said, it does not have an effect to the environment. And then the government will come probably every after 2 years to check if your actions are correct and environmentally sustainable. That's just a precautionary approach. It's just to take precaution. Where you doubt what your actions are, instead of going forward with it, you just stop it. So you take precaution in terms of what your actions are. So that is just
thank you very much. We have a question in the chat room. It says, which aquaculture development strategy should Africa adopt? Develop first, solve problems later, or enforce strong environmental standards at the very beginning?
Yeah, I think we need to have those standards at the beginning, because the beginning is the base. We cannot wait. We need strong institutions, so we need those standards and principles to be adopted as soon as possible at the base, and we lecture people so that they understand what these standards are.
Okay. Quickly, someone said, I know a tilapia expert who also claimed that, I think this is for Dr. Paduku. I know a tilapia expert who also claimed that according to his experience, high protein diet is indeed good for growth. The key is a holistic assessment focused on profitability and risk analysis. Someone also said we need to avoid oversimplified generalization. High protein diets with or without ample aeration may yield different results. Long-term environmental impacts of cage culture of fed species in inland water bodies also need more attention. So in 1 minute, Dr. Paduku, can you give us your closing remarks?
Yeah, let me quickly, in closing remarks, let me attempt to answer those 3 questions. First of all, research has proven already the protein requirement for tilapia. It's just between 28 to 30% CP. So giving your tilapia when it is not in fry stage, trying to give your tilapia feed that is 50%, 48%, 45% will lead you the remaining, the excess protein, the excess nutrient, nutritional, the excess nutrient there will tend to pollute the environment. Then we have a lot of problems truly, which time has not allowed us to discuss on the aspect of impact of cage culture. There are a lot of things when the way people manage culture, because it's in the big environment of that water. Definitely anything you give to your fish there will affect the larger body of water, and you must avoid pollution at all costs. So just to round up, let's try as much as possible to protect our environment, because whatever happens in the environment will bounce back, not only on those that are consuming the fish, but even including the farmers themselves. So we all need to work together with the government to protect our environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for that closing. And thank you so much, Mr. Emmanuel, also for your presentation. I think the take home from this basically for us is that this is not to be left to the government alone. Each and every one of us have a part to play. And we shouldn't just look away. When it's time for us to play our own part, we should stand forth and do what is needful from us. Thank you so much, my presenters. And quickly, I am asked to introduce another speaker quickly on gender analysis of fish farmers. And before that, there's a quick announcement. The certificate of participation in this conference is available on request. The details from this information can be gotten from the Chamber and also the West African region. And quickly, I would like to introduce Mr. Selom Omega, who is presenting on the topic Gender Analysis of Fish Farmers' Preference for Improved ICTs during COVID-19, which is a case study of Ibadan South, Western Nigeria. And also we'll be transmitting in the next few minutes to the live closing session of this wonderful conference that has started since Friday. Thank you all for your time. So I can see Mr. Salom Omega already starting to share his screen. Sir, you have 10 minutes.
Okay,
you have the floor now, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope I can be heard. Yes, so
yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'm presenting on gender analysis of fish farmers' preference for improved ICTs during the period of COVID-19, a case of Ibadan, Nigeria. This will basically be the outline of the presentation. Moving on to the introduction, it has been known that fish consumption has exceeded fish production, and this has led to global deficits, and Nigeria is no exception to this. This has become very important for us to consider the role of gender in aquaculture production. It is known, according to most research, that females are mostly engaged in the upper part of the aquaculture value chain, which is the marketing and the processing, whilst males are engaged in the production, provision of finances, input, among others. This, according to United Nations, has shown that females are more productive when it comes to aquaculture than that of males. Therefore, there is a need for us to find a way to bridge the gap that has been created in the area of production. And we are saying that for us, the use of ICT can play a very important role, especially during the period of COVID-19, where restrictions has been on movement and there is so much difficulty to aquaculture farmers. Therefore, we are saying that closing this gap of women access to a range of closing this gap, there is a need to introduce technologies that would give women the opportunity to engage in production, at the same time have productive time for other activities so that they can earn more returns in the economic activities they do. And this led to the formation of these few objectives for the study, which we are going to look at very soon. And in the research, actually, because of the COVID-19 and the fact that there were restrictions on movement, we could not really get access to a lot of farmers. So we could get access to only 40 farmers, which we randomly selected. Which we randomly selected from. And we used basically the descriptive statistics. It is important to also mention that this research is still underway. It's not completed. We're expecting to extend it into Ghana so that we could make a comparative with studies. In the result, we realized that most of the farmers we interviewed were mostly in the situation of females. You realize that they were mostly spouse and children. They were not family heads. This shows that the traditional concept of family is still embedded, where males, or let me say heads of family, are mainly males. Therefore, the resource control still lies in the hands of males. And to also realize that when it comes to scale of operation, women were still having small farm sizes compared to that of their male counterparts. And also in access to credit, it was also found out that women mostly, or females, mostly had the access or their credit source coming from they financing themselves and that of their families. And you could see that when it comes to loan, at least males were getting more access to loan packages than that of their females. And this is still embedded in a traditional system where it's believed that the resource control lies in the hands of the male. Therefore, even if a female is supposed to go for loan, a consultation has to be done with the male counterpart, which is the spouse in that situation. We went on to look at the ICTs which were being used by this farmers based on gender. And we realized that combining both traditional and advanced ICTs, it realized that females were showing trends of adopting advanced ICTs.
No, that one keep it.
Mr. Emmanuel, please can you mute yourself? Mr. Omega, can you unmute yourself and go ahead, please?
Okay, sorry. So on the table 2, we are looking at the fish farmers' extent of ICT usage, and we realized that combining both traditional and advanced ICT, we realized that based on the traditional ICT, both male and females were using the traditional ICTs, but we also went further to find out what about the advanced ICTs we have, like the agriculture mobile app, among others. And it was realized that, interestingly, females were adopting advanced ICTs or improved ICTs compared to their male counterparts, especially, for example, video conferencing and interactive video response system, which shows that females are gradually adopting ICTs for their communication processes, especially to their customers. And this is very handy, and it gives the idea that when new technologies are being introduced to farmers, females are more likely to also adopt it in the process. And we went to find out the extent to which they are using this ICT. And the results, although the advanced ICT, it was shown that farmers were not mostly using them compared to the traditional one. It was shown that females who are using the advanced ICTs were far better off, or were far using it more than that of their male counterparts. And this was depicted in their mean values we have over here. which shows that indeed, when ICT is introduced into aquaculture, we expect that the role of females in aquaculture would be improved in the process. So we went on for the last process to look at if farmers would be willing to pay for the improved ICTs we are talking about, or if improved ICTs more than the ones we have in the previous table is added, would they still be willing to purchase this improved ICTs? And it was shown that although they had adopted improved ICT in the situation of females, still they will not be willing to part away with their resources to acquire more improved ICTs. And this becomes a worry in the area of aquaculture, which means that still there are things for us to do, like the provision of finances or reducing or subsidizing this ICTs we are talking about to make it more easier for females to part away with resources, because we know how traditionally the woman is supposed to take care of the home and there are a lot of responsibility that comes with it. But it was even also seen that in the situation of male, the differences was not that much. So meaning that there's more to be done in the situation of providing improved ICTs for aquaculture. This led to the conclusion that the Ministry of Agriculture, non-governmental organization, other stakeholders should pay attention to gender-specific ICTs to assist especially the female farmers, to make it easier for female farmers who want to engage in production to easily do so, despite the laborious nature of our current aquaculture production system. And secondly, the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, NGOs and other stakeholders should educate females on the need to adopt some of these improved ICTs for their operations. And this studies recommended that the government, the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, stakeholders in aquaculture should invest more in the training of female farmers in ICT beyond the traditional ICTs we know. And secondly, also the government should give females who are willing to use this improved ICT subsidies to reduce the financial burdens that is associated with this ICT. And lastly, improved ICT should be more farmer friendly and also consider the varying socioeconomic characteristics of farmers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omega, for your time, and thank you for that beautiful presentation. And really, I hope the necessary arm of government that needs to get this information would get to them on the subsidy for female in as regards ICT, and also provision of finances, taking away all the barriers, whatever holds back the women from being able to access these finances, so they can really be willing to be a part of the improved technology in ICT that have been introduced. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for that presentation. Over to the Chamber of Aquaculture. Thank you all.
Continental Free Trade Area, Ghana is creating the linkages that will make it the gateway to Africa, aided by dynamic policies, a stable political environment, and strong economic fundamentals. It is a land of opportunities, offering businesses across many sectors the potential to flourish. The country is open and accessible to investors and the private sector, providing a peaceful environment and upholding the rule of law. The government of Ghana is confident and optimistic about the positive results in its investment drive through the GIPC. Ghana has 8 million hectares of arable land, well irrigated by a wide network of water bodies, making it a region ready for large-scale mechanized agriculture. The government and major policy planners recognize that expanding the agro-industrial base is the best path to develop.